when a vibrant, enthusiastic, loving young mother of two goes missing in Utah in 2009, friends and family begin to piece together the sinister truth of what was really going on behind closed doors. Instead of helping search for his missing wife, the husband recruits his family for a smear campaign on her character, unlocking a chain of events that would end in complete and utter tragedy. Join us tonight as we expose the lengthy list of red flags from an abusive husband and his obsessive father. This is the case of the disappearance of Susan Cox Powell and the horrific murders of Charlie and Braden Powell. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, welcome to the Lost Souls of America podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and joining us tonight is our beautiful producer, Amelia. Hi, Amelia.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
I feel like I said that like extra obnoxiously this time. Beautiful producer, Amelia. I really got into it. Hey, I have something else to tell you.
Well, what's up?
Happy Mother's Day.
Aw, happy Mother's Day, Jamie.
Thanks. I'm so happy I get to say that to you.
Yay. Thank you. Me too. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
Yeah. Amelia, do you have any cases on your heart this week?
I do have a case on my heart this week, Jamie, and it is not a missing persons case. It is an unsolved murder case.
Okay.
So it started as a missing persons case, and that is why I got so invested in looking at this, because when the missing persons announcements went out, I shared it on the Lost Souls Facebook page. And everyone, I know we're getting kind of like picking up some followers over on Instagram, but everyone, like, please be sure to look at the Lost Souls page on Facebook, because that's where we can kind of share more news articles. So kind of keep people more up to date that way.
Yeah, it's so much easier to share on Facebook. I wish Instagram had a better function.
Right, because you can't just like share a link on Instagram.
Right.
Easy.
And not everybody looks at stories.
No.
Anyway, that's my rant. Get on it, Instagram. Okay. Carry on.
So first it was announced that this couple was missing up in Concord, New Hampshire. People couldn't find them. They didn't show up for an event. Their family couldn't get in touch with them. And tragically, they were found dead on Broken Ground Trail in Concord, New Hampshire. Yes.
I did hear, but I told you I didn't, but I did hear. I did. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Keep going.
So they were found dead on Thursday, April 21st, and they went missing on Monday, April 18th. So unfortunately, there was like a few days between when they went missing and when they were found. And so the FBI has now joined onto the investigation into the murders of these two people, who are 67-year-old Stephen Reed and 66-year-old Dejwendi, aka Wendy Reed. An autopsy on both bodies showed that they died of gunshot wounds. So they were literally gunned down in the woods on just a nice walking trail. I know, and it's awful because, Jamie, I know you go out on walks all the time. Me and my husband, we go out on walks like 3 times a week together. And it's scary.
That's really scary. And I shouldn't tell people this, but sometimes I go alone with the kids. Like, that's scary. That's terrifying to me.
It's really scary. Yeah.
And I'm not very far from that. I'm like an hour from there.
Yeah. So they went out for a walk. They were not seen, reported missing after Stephen didn't show up to an event. State officials are not releasing many details of the case, but they say they've received over 60 tips into the murder. It's unclear who shot the couple, and it's even more unclear what that person's motive may have been. What is even more unclear is whether the police are not releasing details because they don't have any, or because they're trying to keep it close to the belt. And there have been a lot of people in the field who have speculated on this both ways, which is really scary. But what they are telling people in Concord is you can go out, keep walking. There's a heightened police presence everywhere. But I don't know. I would not want to if I was there. No way.
No.
So the couple moved to Concord just 3 years ago. It was Stephen's hometown when he grew up, and then he went back there to retire. A statement from the family said that Stephen Reed served 4 years in the Peace Corps in West Africa right after graduating from college. He then met Wendy, who was from West Africa, while she was studying in Washington, D.C. on an athletic scholarship. So I think, isn't that nice? You travel all the way, you do all this work in West Africa, you come back here, and that's where you meet your wife, and you know all about her culture and everything else. I think is really beautiful.
Sad. I know they sound like they had that's such a great story to be able to tell. And if he was in the Peace Corps, I'm sure, I mean, this isn't a rule across the board, but I'm sure he was a pretty great guy.
Well, he was. So they bonded over their love of adventure and fitness. And he had a 30-year career as an international development specialist in service for the world's most vulnerable through the USAID humanitarian project. And the family says he never would have been able to do all the great work he did without the love, care, and support of his wife, Wendy. And Wendy, in her own right, she had recently been working with resettled refugees to help them acclimate here in the United States and help give them like the best help that they could get when coming from a new country. So this is obviously a really awful tragedy up in Concord. It's so unclear what's going on. If any of our listeners are in New Hampshire, from the New Hampshire area, think they might know anything pertaining to this crime. Even the smallest bits of information right now are being totally and completely welcomed by investigators. And anyone with tips, please call the Concord Crime Line at 603-226-3100. Tips can also be submitted online at concordregionalcrimeline.com.
I have so many questions.
I know.
I realize you don't have
like
answers.
No answers, right? I don't even know if the police have any answers.
Obviously, they must not think it's a murder-suicide situation. They must obviously think it's straight up double homicide, right?
This is being treated as a double homicide, yes.
Oof. I would want to know, like, my questions are, do they think this was a targeted attack or do they think this was random? How were the shootings? Were they executed? Did it look like a robbery? You know what I mean? Like, do you know if anything was taken? You don't know.
I don't know. I know it was in the middle of the woods, though.
I mean, what would they have with them for it to be a robbery?
Exactly.
That's not,
Right. You don't typically rob people on like a scenic trail.
Did it look like they had gone for a hike or did it look like they were taken there?
No, they went out for a walk. They would frequent that area. It's a very popular trail.
Oh. Listen, to my friends in the Concord area, stay safe. I have some who go out hiking with their children. That's all I can think about right now. Please stay safe.
I'm sure they're well aware of it because it's I mean,
I know. I was just saying before we started recording, I just was saying that I get all my news from Amelia. So I don't even have, we haven't had cable in like 10 years. So I literally don't watch the news. I'm not kidding. I watch clips of the news all the time in relation to cases, but I'm terrible with like what's happening locally around me. I have no idea. So thanks. Thank you for bringing that to all of our attention. Excuse me. I have a little bit, if I sound a little, I have a little bit of a cold, everybody. Sorry, everybody.
Well soon, Jamie. And if you guys hear a little bird in the background, it's Pancake and she's singing her songs really loudly tonight. So sorry.
Oh, Amelia dotes on her parakeet, everybody. It's very cute. She loves her parakeet.
I love her so much.
It's very cute.
I was feeding her a little celery stick before I ran up here to record with you.
Oh, you were? And I know she likes to sit on your shoulder while you edit episodes.
She does, yeah.
She's my you have to post that.
Co-editor. I should post that. I don't know why I haven't.
You should. People would like that. Anyway, back to the heart. That was a nice little moment to talk about Pancake. Now back to horrible, awful tragedy.
Yeah.
So when we talked about which cases to cover this week, we really decided that we wanted to focus on a mother. It's Mother's Day week and a case, where motherhood was an important part of the story. It was really hard to choose. So many of the people that we speak about are moms. Everyone, literally every single person in the case we spoke about last week was a mother. But we've actually had a few requests for this story. So we decided to go for it now. Actually, a friend of mine was really, really deep down the rabbit hole of this case a few years ago. And we worked together and she was listening to a podcast. I'm guessing it was probably the Cold podcast, which I've not listened to myself. And she would come to work every day going, listen to this thing that I learned about the Susan Powell case. Oh my God, you'll never believe it. And so that's actually, I had already heard of Susan Powell at the time, but she is the one that got me kind of invested in the case. So it's an absolutely insane story. So this one is for my friend Megan. Okay, Amelia, this is a really heavy one. Are you ready to hear all about the case of Susan Cox Powell and her two sons?
Yeah, I think we should just dive right in.
You should have said no. This is an awful one. One of these days, you should just say no. Okay. Susan Cox was born October 16th, 1981, in New Mexico to her parents, Charles, also known as Chuck, and Judy Cox. She was the third daughter for the family who moved from New Mexico to Alaska before settling into life in Washington state. Her family describes her here for the Susan Cox Powell Foundation. Susan is an outgoing, optimistic person with a servant's heart and boundless energy. She's characterized by her faith in her Heavenly Father, her determination to provide for her children, and her belief that families are forever. Susan was raised Mormon and was very devoted to her faith, regularly attending services at her Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She also sought out relationships and friendships in that community as well. In November of 2000, when Susan was just 19, she was taking a course at the LDS Institute of Religion, and she attended a little dinner party with her classmates where she met Joshua Powell. Josh was a little bit older than Susan, 24, but he had a decent job, a good head on his shoulders as far as she could tell, and Susan was very drawn to him right away. Josh's upbringing was not quite as loving and faithful as Susan's, though he was also raised in the LDS church. By the time he met Susan, his faith was really shaken. His parents, Stephen and Terica, who usually went by Terry, had a total of 5 children and what was known as a very tumultuous marriage. When Josh was around 16, they finally divorced after years of arguments and tension. Terry said in court documents that Stephen was really pressuring her to add a second wife to their relationship, plural marriage, even though he had apparently left the Mormon church, but that she was not interested. She alleged that he must have cheated, though, regardless, because she claims he gave her an STI. The court documents also show that Terry alleged some pretty dark things about Stephen's parenting to boot. She claimed that he watched pornography around the boys and even pitted them against each other and encouraged them to fight. All of this really contributed to some major mental health issues for Josh, who actually tried to take his own life at least once that I know of as a teenager. Still, despite their differences, Susan believed that if anyone could bring Josh back to his faith, it was her. And she was also very eager to settle down and fulfill her dream of becoming a mother. By April of 2001, just 5 months after they'd met, Susan and Josh married at the Portland, Oregon temple. After their wedding, they lived for a time with Josh's father, Stephen, but eventually relocated to West Valley City, Utah, where they settled in and went on to have 2 little boys, Charlie in 2005 and Braden in 2007. December 6, 2009 was a Sunday that started like any other for the Powell family at their West Valley City home. Susan began by taking the kids to church, something she rarely missed. And that afternoon, back at the house, a neighbor stopped by for a visit. She says that Josh offered to make dinner for them all, which was kind of a nice treat for Susan since she usually did most of the cooking and cleaning. And they all went to town on a really typical dad feast, breakfast for dinner, it was pancakes. Throughout the meal, Susan actually began to say that she wasn't feeling very well. So around 5 p.m., she decided that she was so off, she wanted to go try and take a little nap. She went to bed, and Josh said he was going to take the boys sledding, presumably, to get out of mom's hair so that she could rest. The neighbor said her farewells, and that is the last time that anyone would see the Powell family before everything changed forever. The next morning, Charlie and Braden's daycare provider grew kind of concerned when the boys didn't arrive at their normal drop-off time. If it was Josh's day to drop the boys off, she might not have reacted so strongly. He was kind of prone to showing up at any odd time, but not Susan. On Mondays, Susan always dropped the boys off early. When the daycare provider couldn't reach either Susan or Josh by phone by 9 a.m., she grew worried and she called the emergency contacts, Josh's mom, Terica, and Josh's sister, Jennifer Graves. They also called their jobs only to find that neither parent had shown up for work that day. So Terica and Jennifer rushed over to the Powell home to check on them. When they found no one there, they feared a carbon monoxide leak or some other emergency, and so they called the police. Officers met them at the home, and with Josh's mom's permission, they broke in only to find no sign at all of the family. There were a couple points of note that really stood out to the responding officers, though. Number one, Susan's purse was still there, something her family says she'd obviously have not left behind. Number two, the carpet and or the couch, I've actually heard reports of both either. It was all wet, as if maybe it had just been like deep cleaned. And there were two box fans that were set up, blowing on them, sort of as if it was to dry them. While everyone in the Powell family circle feverishly searched for them, Josh just casually pulled into the family driveway around 5 p.m. that evening. He and the boys piled out, and for a second, everyone was thrilled to see them all A-OK. But that excitement quickly faded when they noticed that Susan wasn't with them. When they wanted to know where Susan was, he just said, "I don't know, I guess she went to work." Of course, everyone was immediately wondering where on earth they'd been all day. And he told them that he'd taken the boys camping. This immediately raised some questions for investigators because the previous night had actually been very cold and snowy.
It's just a stupid alibi.
Right?
It's just dumb. Like you couldn't have thought of something better than, I just took the boys camping on a school night.
At 2 a.m, too. They left in the middle of the night, according to him, to go camping. Because that's a normal thing to do.
How old are these kids again?
2 and 5.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Remember, too, this was December in Utah. So they were like red flags all over the place. They asked Josh to meet them the next day for a formal official interview at the station. But that appointment time came and went with no Josh. And his family found him there at the house, deep cleaning, when he was supposed to be down at the police station. They had to rally him up. "Let's go, Josh. You're supposed to be at your interview." And eventually he did stroll in 4 hours late so they could carry on with their questioning. Now, this is only the beginning of the red flags we find coming from the Powell family in the disappearance of Josh's wife, Susan. There's so many that I know I'll miss some tonight, maybe for the sake of brevity or I just miss it. But there were a couple answers that Josh gave early on that really seemed to stand out to everyone as not making a lot of sense. For starters, Josh stated that he wasn't answering his phone the day of Susan's disappearance because it was dying and he needed to conserve his battery. But one of the investigators who saw him arrive on the scene says it was plugged into a charger cable in the car. Also, Josh says Susan must have gone to work, and he even left her a voicemail saying that he went by to pick her up. But someone during the day actually says they had gotten a hold of him, and they claim that he knew she wasn't there and that everyone was looking for her. Furthermore, Josh claimed that he was confused on his days, and he thought it was Saturday night when he left for camping, not Sunday. And that's why he didn't show up for work on Monday morning, which in and of itself is crazy. That's not a thing. But if that's the case and that's his excuse, why was he so convinced then that Susan was at work? Lastly, Josh had some cuts on his hands that he had absolutely no explanation for.
You got to come up with an explanation for those defense marks.
Right. And let's just talk about the camping, right? You already said it. Who takes a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old camping in the middle of the night in a snowstorm?
It's crazy. Who takes a 2-year-old camping, period?
I have. It's not that bad.
You have?
Oh, yeah.
God bless you.
Like, as a baby, we love camping. But anyway, do you want to know what his reason was for why he did this?
Can I try to guess?
Yeah. Please.
Hunting. It was a hunting?
No.
Want to get like bison?
No, it's way worse.
Okay.
The boys wanted s'mores.
Oh, shut up.
I swear to God, that's what he said.
So like he had to take them camping?
Right, as if you can't make s'mores in the microwave.
Let's say I make s'mores in my house all the time.
So listen, detectives were not buying that any more than you or I or any of our listeners are right now. And so they actually sent investigators to the campground where he says he went to have a look around. As you can guess, there was absolutely no sign that anyone had been to that particular campground in quite some time, let alone built a fire and roasted s'mores. In fact, police even had trouble conducting the search because the snow was so heavy.
Could you imagine if he was telling the truth, though? Like, I feel like that'd be like a whole nother criminal investigation. Like, wait, you took a 2-year-old camping in a snowstorm in Utah in December? Like,
it's pretty rough. That's pretty rough. During Josh's interview, the police, of course, seized the family van as evidence. And so when the interview concluded, Josh left, rented a car, and disappeared in it for 2 days. No one knows where. No one knows what he did during this time. And no one admits that they spoke to him during this window of time either. But when he returned the car, there were 800 miles on it. While the Cox family initially showed some support for Josh, it wasn't long before the investigation revealed some startling indications that Susan was not happy in her marriage. Though everyone in Susan's life agreed that they weren't ever all that crazy about Josh, Susan had done a good job of, only sharing bits and pieces of their problems. So it wasn't until they all began comparing notes about things she'd said to them that they realized there had been some cries for help. Josh had been extremely controlling toward both Susan and the boys. He controlled what their family ate, even only allowing the boys to split a hot dog because they were only going to, quote, poop it out anyway. Susan wasn't allowed to use the car without his permission, and he almost always took it with him so that she had to bike 7 miles to and from work. He kept a strict budget, and he made Susan DIY as much as possible, including knit the family's socks, which, by the way, is not necessarily cheaper. So to me, that's like just straight control. That's like a control issue. Here's the real kicker. You're going to love this.
Right. Now that I think about it.
Yarn is pricey.
Very pricey.
Here's the real kicker, and you're going to love this one. One of the sources that we used even says that Josh made Susan call a friend to get a ride to the hospital when she was in labor with Charlie. He missed Charlie's birth entirely. Do you want to know why? What he was so busy doing?
Not really.
He was backing up his computer, Amelia.
What a ding dong. What is that?
You don't need to be there for that.
Ladies, if your husband misses the birth of your child to back up a computer, you can get a divorce. You can leave. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, well, while the investigation continued, police found even more suspicious evidence in the Powell family home. To your point, Amelia, about the divorce.
He's probably looking at like child porn or something on the computer. That's why he needed to be there.
So Susan had been keeping journals her whole life and had many entries showing that she was not happy in her marriage and was seeking a way out, like you said. She had actually contacted a divorce attorney, and at his encouragement, they found videos that she had made recording all of their belongings to kind of catalog their assets. The video is actually really eerie to watch because she says that she hopes they'll live happily ever after, but if they don't,
That's actually, honestly, it's a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Like, you got to protect yourself.
Perhaps the most alarming thing that investigators found wasn't actually in the Powell family home at all. It was hidden in a safe deposit box that Susan kept at the bank where she worked. A handwritten, makeshift last will and testament. In this, she detailed just how bad her marriage had become and the fact that Josh had taken out over a $1 million life insurance policy on her. In her own words, she wrote, "If I die, it may not be an accident."
Can I say two things about this?
Please.
Thing number one, I had a life insurance policy out on me that I had with a business partner of mine. In case something happened to one of us, the other would get some money to help with the business. He ended up being a terrible person. And I got very scared because I had this life insurance policy out and I knew he would profit from my death. And I was very afraid of him. I want everyone to know, if you are in this situation, you can cancel it and they will not tell the other person. So when I called the insurance company and switched it, so they asked if I wanted to cancel, if I just wanted to switch. So it was paid for. So I switched to my brother and it's since been canceled. But I made it clear to them, I'm like, do not tell my business partner. And they don't at all. So if you're in a situation where you're really worried about something like this, get yourself out of it. It's a quick phone call. And if you're nervous for any means, I mean, get help, because you shouldn't be worried about someone killing you for life insurance. Second thing I want to say is if you're in Massachusetts and you need a will, you don't have to write it yourself. You can visit Paul Schwartzman at twinpinelaw.com and he'll help you out. That's my husband.
Okay, those were both excellent. Yeah. That's Amelia's husband. Those are both actually excellent pieces of advice. I think in this case, because she was so afraid for her life, part of it, the fact that they could prove it was her handwriting actually contributed to the evidence. So it's a kind of a good thing that she wrote it by hand. That being said, if someone were to meet with a last will and testament attorney, obviously like the attorney would vouch for that as well. So then that adds another layer, which says, look, there's problems. So you
definitely
should maybe do both. Have handwritten notes that say, this is what I'm afraid of. And then also meet with attorneys, all of them, for the variety of things.
For everything. Also is just like an asterisk, not really related, but handwritten wills, they can be contested and they usually get contested. And isn't that shitty?
Oh, that's good to know.
Isn't that awful though?
Yeah, it is.
That you can write down exactly what you want and it doesn't.
It is awful, especially I feel like because of ageism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Like it with like people with technology, that's a problem.
Huge problem.
So police also discovered that prior to Susan's disappearance, Josh had attempted to move some money out of her retirement account. And I guess he even tried to cancel some other important policies that she had in place. At this point, they declared him an official person of interest in his wife's disappearance. And Susan's family could now see him for who they felt he truly was. But they were devastated that he wasn't just arrested. Authorities simply didn't feel they had enough without Susan's body. We've heard that before, right?
Yes.
Josh's family fiercely defended him, and they didn't take this announcement lying down. The only outlier in this was Josh's sister, Jennifer. Jennifer even offered to wear a wiretap. She went to the police and said, I think my brother's involved. Hook me up and I'm going to ask him questions. But no one confessed to anything. And her questioning actually only seemed to alienate her from the siblings and her father even more. Josh and his dad, Stephen, started what could only be called a total smear campaign against Susan, basically announcing to the world that she's a whore, she's a liar. They even started a website made to discredit her reputation. Imagine your missing wife.
No.
They publicly stated on that website, and also it sounds like to anybody who would listen, that they thought she was having an affair with a local reporter who also happened to go missing around the same time. To be clear, there's never been any connection at all between the reporter and her. And I actually think that the reporter might have eventually been found. Don't hold me to that. I'm not sure. But None of the sources that I see use that person's name, but I have heard that. What's really interesting, by interesting, I mean incredibly creepy here, is that this seems to be a major change of opinion coming from Josh's dad, Stephen. Susan's journal entries and the interviews with her friends and family revealed that Stephen actually had a bit of a fixation on Susan that made her kind of uncomfortable over the years. They even say that the reason Susan and Josh relocated to Utah in the first place, because they were trying to get away from Stephen. When they were staying with him in Washington, I guess he had suggested that they share her. Susan was
That's
horrified.
really yucky. Yeah, I'm horrified too. That's really bad.
Yeah.
But they weren't. Sorry, Jamie, I apologize if you've mentioned this already and I just didn't get it, because you just said that, and earlier you mentioned bringing in a second wife. I know they lived in Utah. They weren't Mormons, were they?
Yeah, both sides of the family were Mormons.
They were Mormons.
Susan,
okay.
Yeah. So Josh's family were all raised in the LDS church as well, but Stephen had left the church. And so I think that was part of the contention in the divorce between Terry and Stephen, was that they couldn't really come to terms with an agreement on their religious beliefs. So, by the way, though, that tells me that Stephen was full of crap about wanting to bring another wife in, because he had already left the Mormon faith when he did that. Like, it wasn't a religious thing. It was like a for joy thing. But like, if you're going to do that, both sides have to agree. You can't.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Has to be a really mutual decision. And it wasn't one that was based on faith, because Stephen didn't believe it. But I think he thought, this is just my speculation now, I think he thought he could talk Terry into it because she was a devout Mormon.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, he couldn't. He couldn't.
Thank God.
So
yeah.
After Susan disappeared, Josh had moved in with his dad again. And as part of their whole smear campaign against his missing wife, Josh claimed that he had seen her childhood diaries, which would prove somehow that she had run away because she was some sort of sexual deviant. The problem was authorities couldn't prove that these diaries were really in their possession, so they had no probable cause to search Stephen Powell's home. But they brilliantly set up a public scene in an attempt to bait Stephen into admitting something that would get a judge to sign a search warrant. At this point in the investigation, Susan's dad, Chuck, and Josh's dad, Stephen, had built up a very public feud. So authorities sent Susan's family down to like the local grocery store parking lot, and they set them up with what we would call a honk and wave in Susan's honor and memory, just with posters like, have you seen this woman? Their plan worked like a charm. And before long, Stephen showed up to rant and rave, and he was fully getting in the grieving family's face. He was yelling horrible things about Susan, and just as investigators suspected, he joyfully announced that they had evidence at home, dummy, that would prove Susan was a liar. And so that was all that was needed. And a warrant was soon signed, sealed, and delivered. And the home was searched. The unexpected revelations that they found in Stephen's home continue to shock people 13 years later. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Buckle up. In somewhat of an unrelated twist, Stephen was found to be in possession of child pornography and actual voyeuristic photographs that he'd taken of neighborhood children, young girls. He was swiftly arrested.
Didn't I call that?
You did.
Didn't I call that?
That's why I ignored you. I just kept talking because I was like, she knows. She's got it. Yeah. So he was swiftly arrested, thankfully. And as they continued to like comb through the evidence, they discovered that his infatuation with his daughter-in-law was far beyond what anyone had ever imagined. Stephen had kept logs of Susan's behavior, comings and goings, along with tons of video and photo evidence to show that he'd been watching her for years. Despite the fact that these photos were often taken from a distance and it didn't look at all like she knew she was being followed or watched, you can actually hear Stephen's creepy voice in the background as he tries to convince himself that she's doing it for him and that she was desperately and secretly in love with him and wants him just as much as he wants her. It's vile. I want to go shower. Ugh. As if stalking wasn't creepy enough, the investigation also uncovered a ton of little baggies labeled Susan. They were filled with her personal things like cotton swabs, nail clippings, hair.
Gross.
He'd also written and recorded at least one incredibly skeevy love song that I've heard about their secret love. One which, according to everyone in Susan's life, was completely uninvited and unrequited. When Stephen was arrested, this prompted another man to come forward, saying that in late December of 2009, just a few weeks after Susan's disappearance, Michael Powell, Josh's brother, had sold this man a car for scrap for only $100. At the time, he'd even thought that was pretty odd on its own without even recognizing the connection to the missing person. But when he heard of Stephen's arrest 2 years later, his spidey senses started tingling and he was like, wait a minute, that Powell family? And so he called authorities. Though they'd gotten rid of much of the car by then, what was left of it was searched by a cadaver dog named Tug. Tug blew right past all the other cars and went straight to Michael's car, indicating that there had been human remains in the vehicle. Investigators waited with bated breath, hoping that this was the break in the case that they needed, but no DNA linking the car to Susan was recovered. And they returned their focus back to Stephen and Josh. Despite this vile, nauseating behavior that Stephen Powell was arrested for, there was still nothing concrete that could connect him to the disappearance of Susan. But police also focused their attentions on Josh's belongings, and they did discover some disturbing content, what they called simulated child pornography, basically animated cartoon kiddie porn. So you called that part of it too. Unfortunately, because it wasn't real, it wasn't illegal. So rather than arresting Josh, they had no choice but to let him go. And it did lead to the boys being removed, at least temporarily, from his custody. And they were sent, luckily, to live with Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy, while Josh was waiting for a full psychosexual evaluation. Now, as part of this parental competency evaluation, police were kind of excited because it meant that he could be given a full polygraph exam, one that he could not decline, which, by the way, he did decline their previous offers, so his lawyer told him to, and that they could ask him anything they wanted. So everyone was kind of hopeful that this might lead to some more answers. Little Charlie, who was 5 when his mom went missing, was also interviewed by a forensic child psychologist during this kind of extended investigation. While it's kind of tricky to take the memory of a small child into account, he did make some statements that everyone involved found alarming at best. Over the course of his 2 meetings, he told the interviewer that they went camping with mommy, but that she stayed where the crystals are. He also said that he's not allowed to talk about Susan and that he's not allowed to talk about camping. He said, and this is a quote on video, "I have to keep a lot of secrets." Similarly, while Charlie was in the Cox family's custody, he drew a family photo of his dad and his brother and himself. And then he pointed to the trunk and he said that that's mommy.
That's awful.
I know. Chuck and Judy also say that when the boys came to live with them, their behavior was completely out of control. It was as if they'd had no discipline, no guidance, and no love in the Powell home after their mom went missing. While everyone waited for the state to complete their investigation into Josh's fitness as a parent, He was permitted to have supervised visitations with the boys and a licensed social worker. Normally, this would be something that's done in a public office setting, but since there was such a massive amount of media attention on the case, I think, it made some of the other clients of the social work office feel really uncomfortable. The state actually allowed the visitations to be held in Josh's new home, one that he was renting near his father's residence, that, his father's house had been part of that investigation. So he moved out and he moved into this home that he was renting, and that's where the visitations were. On Sunday, February 5th, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Griffin arrived at Josh's residence with Charlie and Braden for their supervised visitation. She knocked on the door and Josh answered, and the boys gleefully ran inside. Before Elizabeth was able to follow, Josh slammed the door on her. As the front door wafted the air into her face, Elizabeth noticed the unmistakable smell of gasoline and ran to call 911. We're not going to play that 911 call for you this episode. Personally, I listened to it years ago and it has stuck with me in the worst way. I could not listen to it again myself, and I didn't want to subject that on anyone without their explicit consent. You have the choice to make for yourself. It's available everywhere online. I know that some of the sources that we use on the website have it there. You can also find it pretty easily with a quick Google. Please be warned that the call itself is not super graphic, but it's really frustrating and upsetting. And the rest of our story tonight is graphic and it is difficult to hear. And I've never gotten through it, even listening to it, without crying. So please forgive me if I get a little bit emotional. I'm already starting. 911 dispatcher David Lovrak's cold response to Elizabeth's cry for help was one that has since led to pleas for reform in the training of emergency dispatchers. It was very evident right off the bat that he was not taking her seriously. He went around and around with her for 8 whole minutes while she tried to explain to him what exactly a supervised visit is, who's doing the supervising, and why this man isn't allowed to be alone with his own children. He came across as flippant and dismissive as he repeatedly tells her for 8 whole minutes that 911 is for emergency life-threatening issues and that they'll send someone when they can. She cried and begged for him to understand for 8 whole minutes that this is life-threatening. She told him that inside she could hear the boys crying and screaming. And after 8 whole minutes, David Lovrak finally, reluctantly, agreed to send someone out to have a look. A terrified Elizabeth hung up the phone to wait for officers to arrive, and Josh Powell's home exploded behind her. It took another 13 minutes for anyone to arrive on scene. 7-year-old Charlie Powell and 5-year-old Braden Powell had died in a murder-suicide at the hands of their own father. Evidence recovered at the scene indicated that all 3 had died of carbon monoxide poisoning, smoke inhalation. But only Charlie and Braden had multiple stab wounds determined to be from a hatchet. The boys' bodies were recovered together, curled up on the floor, holding hands.
That's horrific.
Yeah. Whew. That's the part that gets me every time, is the hand holding and the hatchet. I just can't even. Whew. Though no one has ever been charged in the disappearance of Susan Cox Powell, most people seem to operate under the belief that Josh was responsible for the death of his wife and possibly was helped to cover it up by his father, Stephen, and his brother, Michael. Tragically, we may never know because all 3 men are now dead. Michael took his own life in 2013 by jumping from the roof of a large building in downtown Minneapolis in front of several witnesses. Stephen died of a heart attack shortly after his release from prison in 2017. No one has ever confessed. No evidence has ever been recovered that could connect them to Susan's murder. And even Sister Jennifer believes there never will be. In February of 2022, the world got a pinch of renewed hope with skeletal remains found in a mine near where Josh says he took the boys camping that December night in 2009. Unfortunately for Susan's family, it was yet another dead end. Charlie and Braden would be 17 and 15 today. Chuck and Judy Cox do their best to live every day in honor of their daughter and grandsons. Let's read for you a little bit about some of the action steps the Cox family has been taking to effect change on behalf of their loved ones.
The Susan Cox Powell Foundation was established in 2010 by Susan's parents with the help of friends. And after an overwhelming response from people around the world, their emails, letters, and Facebook messages of support and sharing of other parents with missing children, questions of parents concerned about their children in potentially similar situations, but without the support we felt, moved us to create this foundation. The mission of the foundation is to assist families of missing persons by providing no-cost strategic media consulting services to ensure their loved ones' face and name remain in the public eye as long as possible, to research and catalog resources across the United States that may be helpful to families of missing persons in an effort to create a resource clearinghouse for other families to use at their time of crisis, to support domestic violence prevention efforts and participate in community and school-based education about domestic violence prevention, with a special emphasis on recognizing the early signs of abuse. The Susan Cox Powell Foundation has an even stronger desire to reach out and provide assistance to other families as a legacy to our daughter Susan and our grandsons Charlie and Braden Powell. We have partnered with the Tears Foundation, who have established the Charlie and Braden Project. They now accept donations and provide assistance in Washington State to parents of families losing a child between the ages of 1 and 12 by helping them pay some of the costs of the burial, a burden faced by parents already trying to deal with such a powerful loss. The local sheriff deputy and his partner were moved by a drawing by Charlie of a dinosaur, the tragedy of the boy's death, and their experience with other children who, through no fault of their own, entered foster care and have their lives forever impacted. They established the Charlie Dinosaur Project with the help of Crime Stoppers. This organization provides new clothing, backpacks to help with the foster care moves, school supplies, and other necessities.
I love that so much. I love that. That's like really special to me. I don't know. I'm just happy that they've gone on, in the wake of their tragedy to help other people. It always makes me so proud of the families in these stories. Okay, friend, sorry that I broke your heart tonight. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, just people are terrible. And no, I do have a thought. And that's if you're in one of those situations where you're like, should I leave? Should I not leave? I don't know. What can I do? Just leave. Just leave. Because this is what can happen.
Right.
I mean, if you're at the point where you're filming your assets, you're doing handwritten wills, you're scared to death of your life insurance policy, leave. And you know what? The church will forgive you. And I don't know too much about the Mormon religion, but in Christianity, and I know divorce is a no-no, but God forgives all sins. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. If you have to tell somebody or write something down to the effect of, if I die, it might not be an accident, you need to go.
Yeah, it's over.
I don't have any evidence of any kind to say this, but my theory, my speculation, my curiosity, I should say, is I bet he had this plotted for some time. And every time the reason I kind of included the detail about the pancakes and how she wasn't feeling well is because I have to wonder if he had tried to poison her or something and it didn't work. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence of such.
It feels like this was planned. It feels planned. And that he was just a dirtbag. And there were so many red flags. Oh my God, there were so many red flags. And if people have these massive red flags, please get out of that situation. Please, please, please.
I mean, the thing with the dad is the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Dude, he had bags of her toenail clippings. Yeah, the stuff with the dad really I just can't. I mean, that's probably the least important part of the story, but I think the dad.
Well, the dad raised the son.
Yeah.
The dad raised the son.
And I have no doubt that the dad and probably also Michael helped him cover it up, is my guess.
I'm sure. The dad was a sicko creep and the kid was a sicko creep. And it doesn't always happen that way, but in this instance, it did.
When they arrested Stephen Powell and they every single time from the moment they arrested him. After that, when they would question him about Susan, he would say, I plead the fifth. Never answered a single question about her after that.
It's crazy.
So tonight I will leave with you the Susan Cox Powell Foundation's own calls to action by sharing the How to Help link in our show notes and sources. The nonprofit organization accepts general financial donations, but also donations of time and skills. If you've got qualifications which could help families of the missing, please do reach out and connect with them. The website is also full of useful links and phone numbers for anyone who may be suffering from domestic violence. If you feel unsafe or at risk in your home, please do not wait until it's too late. Call the U.S. National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also visit www.thehotline.org, or you can text Love Is to 22522. As Susan's family says, the only way evil can win is if good people do nothing. So please do your best to get involved and help out on behalf of this mother who was taken far too soon from this world. That's all we have for you tonight. Thank you for listening. You can find shareable content on our social media at Lost Souls of America and our website, lostsoulsofamerica.com. Please share often and help spread awareness for their cases. These are the stories of the voiceless. These are the lost souls of America.